คุณจะได้รับฟังเรื่องราวของการหาแหล่งเงินทุนเพื่อธุรกิจเพื่อสังคมนะคะเพื่อที่คุณผู้ชมจะได้เข้าใจความแตกต่างของแหล่งเงินทุนนะคะว่าเงินให้เปล่าเนี่ยตั้งแต่เงินให้เปล่านะคะไปจนถึงการลงทุนเพื่อสังคมเลยทีเดียวว่ามีความแตกต่างกันอย่างไรนะคะโดยวันนี้เรามีผู้ร่วมเสวนาด้วยกันทั้งหมด3ท่านนะคะแล้วก็อีก1ผู้ดำเนินรายการจากองค์กรผู้ให้ทุนตัวจริงในต่างประเทศเลยนะคะกับวงเสวนาหัวข้อ Funding for Impact in Southeast Asia โดย TBN Asia นะคะก็ต้องบอกเลยว่าธุรกิจเพื่อสังคมที่เข้าร่วมงานเสวนานี้นะคะก็จะได้เข้าใจแหล่งเงินทุนที่แตกต่างหลากหลายนะคะรวมถึงมองเห็นภาพรวมของแหล่งเงินทุนในภูมิภาคเอเชียตะวันออกเฉียงใต้มากยิ่งขึ้นด้วยล่ะค่ะแล้วก็ที่สำคัญเลยนะคะก็จะได้รู้ด้วยค่ะว่าแหล่งทุนเองเนี่ยเขามองหาอะไรในการสนับสนุนธุรกิจเพื่อสังคมนะคะแล้วก็เราจะทำอย่างไรให้เป็นที่ต้องตาต้องใจของแหล่งทุนเหล่านี้นะคะนอกจากนี้ค่ะวงเสวนานี้นะคะยังเหมาะกับผู้ที่ให้ทุนนะคะแล้วก็เป็นนักลงทุนที่กำลังมองหาแนวทางการพัฒนาการสนับสนุนด้านเงินทุนหรือว่าการลงทุนของคุณเองด้วยค่ะซึ่งการเสวนาในวันนี้นะคะด้วยความที่ผู้ร่วมเสวนามาจากต่างประเทศเราก็จะดำเนินรายการเป็นภาษาอังกฤษนะคะแต่ว่าคุณผู้ชมที่รับฟังอยู่ตรงนี้จะได้รับชมเป็นภาษาไทยนะคะแต่ว่าดิฉันอาจจะขออนุญาตเข้าสู่เนื้อหาเป็นภาษาอังกฤษต่อไปสักเล็กน้อยนะคะ Welcome all to today's session in the topic of funding for impact in Southeast Asia by TBN Asia. The host of this session, TBN Asia, our great partner from Singapore. TBN Asia is an intermediary working to fight poverty through enterprise in Southeast Asia. And TBN Asia supports social enterprises serving marginalized communities to eradicate poverty in Southeast Asia. In Thailand itself, TBN Asia, in collaboration with Northeast Family Office, just launched the Resilience Program and successfully distribute a grant of almost 2 million baht to 6 social enterprises in Thailand that will take this grant forward to pivoting their business models in response to the effect of COVID-19. We are very happy to have our great moderator, Wen Li Lim, from TBN Asia to take us through the session today. Wen, thank you very much, and over to you now, please.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having us today. We are very excited to be here. We have a couple of us here from Singapore actually, and it's so great that Zoom allows us to be all together and to have a great discussion today on funding for impact in Southeast Asia. So we hope the other sessions have been great, and we hope that whatever we discuss today will be helpful and hopefully to build relationship and also just to share, the funding scene and what we're seeing here. And a lot of the funding actually that's out of Singapore is actually focused on Southeast Asia. And that includes Thailand and other places. So we're just really happy today to share about the work of the 3 panelists today, what their organizations do, and what they, what kind of projects they're seeking to fund. I know so that in the room there are, social enterprise founders, their teams, and also non-profits who are looking at potentially doing a social enterprise. So I'd like to now take the opportunity to introduce the 3 panelists. Firstly, we have Ms.Carol Liu, who's the Project Manager Philanthropy at Northeast Family Office, Singapore. So interestingly, Carol actually studied Thai in university and is currently learning Thai right now as well. And she'll talk more about what her family office does, but she told me not to ask her to speak Thai as she's very embarrassed that it's not very good. But we're really glad to have you here today. Next, we have Mr. Alex T, Managing Director of Beneficial Returns, and Alex is based in Singapore as well. And Dr. Chan Yinglock, the Senior Director of Investments at Garden Impact. So now I'm going to introduce and ask Carol, can you introduce yourself a little, a bit about the family office and about what you do in your role?
Sure, thank you. I'm not going to speak Thai, so I'm going to do this in English. So just very quickly, I'll just give a brief overview of like what we do at the office. So Northeast Family Office Singapore is actually a global multi-family office established in 2013 by the Danish founders of the global jewelry brand Pandora. And the fun fact about Pandora is actually a business that originated in Thailand. So the factories and the craftsmen were actually all Thai. And that's kind of the reason why, other than having our headquarters in Denmark, Copenhagen, we also have our offices here in Singapore, where I'm based, as well as Thailand as well, where two of the Pandora family members actually live. As a family office, we are essentially full service providers. So we manage all their assets. We also manage their investments, as well as all their philanthropic kind of interest, which basically comes under my purview. So I'm basically responsible for managing a few family foundations, as well as the family trust, in which we sort of deploy the capital across the spectrum. So we give everything from grants to equity to debt to basically investments in general, both in non-profit organizations, but also enterprises, working with issues that matter to our families. So I'll just end off here kind of saying three main things about the way we give our capital. First and foremost, our capital is basically philanthropic capital by nature, which in our opinion should be number one, patient. So it's more longer term horizon. Two, more risk tolerant. So we are prone to taking more risk than other people. Three, it's more flexible. We're not so concerned about exactly what you spend the money on, as long as within the mission-driven kind of intention. And to some extent, it's even concessionary. So returns play a less important role in my department as opposed to my colleagues from the investment side. I guess second thing that in a way that the way we give is not just monetary. So we also provide a lot of non-financial kind of capacity building support around improving your impact model, your business model, your governance structures, and etc. This is something that we strongly believe in, that founders shouldn't just focus on getting investment in terms of financial gains, but also the kind of support you need to grow your business to more scale. And the last thing I would just say is we are very much a very young organization, so our capital is a learning capital. So we often see all types of investments and grants that we give as a way for us to learn more about the sector, so that we can actually get better in the way that we give. So I'll just end off here.
Great, thanks, Carol. I think one thing you'll realize is that a lot of investors and people who want to give and invest, they want to do more than money. And they will only participate usually if they feel they can add value and add something else and not just capital. So really, it's a great thing because it's a long-term relationship and it's about being active and how can we assist each other and not just, write a check and then don't speak for a long time. So that's definitely how I know Northeast does it. And now over to Alex. Can you introduce yourself a little and and what does beneficial returns do?
Sure, Wen. Yeah, if I were a social entrepreneur, I'll be applying to Carol's family office right after this. Thanks, Carol, for that. And I think the translator was doing a magnificent job. Really good. So for beneficial returns, we are a debt impact fund. What motivates our work is really poverty alleviation, as well as improvement of the natural environment. So we've got two funds. One is called the Reciprocity Fund. And for that, we make loans up to $75,000 for enterprises that are supporting indigenous communities. And the reason for that is usually we find that a very small percentage of indigenous communities are stewards of huge portions of biodiversity. Something like 2% of the population stewards, up to 80% of the biodiversity in the world. So we really want to support the communities that are doing this. And for that, we make loans without collateral, usually around 3-4 years. And there's usually a grace period, and these loans usually amortize. And in certain cases, they are working capital loans, so interest only and repayment at the end. Then we have the main fund. and that is also a debt fund. And we make loans between 50 and 500,000 US dollars, and usually to fund machinery, either to, as you scale, as you want to develop new production lines, and that usually the equipment that you procure with our loan is usually what we require as collateral. So we're looking to serve that missing middle. You are not a startup, you're revenue generating, you've been operating for around 3 years at least. Your cash flow, you're generating some cash flows, but not quite big enough for the banks. And without attracting punitive kinds of interest rates. So that's the space that we like to operate. And a lot of our work is really, the work of connecting the rich and the poor, connecting the people with the resources, with people who are doing some magnificent work. So we see ourselves as that connector, as that isthmus. I'll stop here.
Great, thank you, Alex. Later on, we will dive into the type of projects and specific projects that these groups here have funded and supported, so we can get into more details later. Yingluck, can you share about your work and Garden Impact? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you, Wen. Thanks. Sawadee krap, everyone. This is Yingluck from Singapore. I'm a Senior Director of Investments with Garden Impact Investments. Garden Impact Investments is an impact fund. It is slightly more than 10 years old. And our focus is to invest in social enterprises in Southeast Asia, right? By way of background, I actually was in investment banking, and then I went to venture capital. And as investment banking and venture capitalists, our main focus was just make money, right? Doesn't matter what happens to the world, we just make money. In 2010, I was introduced to this world of impact investment. And impact investment is more than just making money. It has to have a twin effect of, making sustainable financial returns as well as helping a sustainable world. So the word sustainability came into the picture. So I saw myself moving from being a venture capitalist to being an impact capitalist. I jokingly say that, I'm now a venture capitalist with a heart. But a lot of people tell me venture capitalists don't have hearts. So I correct myself though. I say, okay, I'm now an impact capitalist. All right. Okay. So anyway, Garden Impact was set up and by a guy called Mason Tan. And I used to know Mason many years ago when we were both venture capitalists. At the same time, about 10 years ago, Mason started Garden Impact as a private impact fund, and I joined the Singapore government with the Singapore government's impact fund. So we had similar start, but when I left the government impact fund, I joined Garden Impact, and so being with Garden Impact for about 6 years now, we have grown our investments in the impact space. Just a little bit of background then on what we invest in. Later on, of course, Wen is going to ask questions of types and prospects and all that. Just suffice me to say that our focus is more on people. More on people, because today we talk about ESG, right? Environmental, social, governance. But Garden Impact, the investment, the focus is on people, helping people. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Yingluck. Why we wanted to have these three panelists today is because they work in very different kind of structures and focuses. So we have a family office, we have a debt fund, and then we have an impact VC. So we thought that it's a great variety, and we hope that you will ask questions as we go along, that you can, and you can address it to specific people, because it's very different, the three people that we have on the panel and how they approach impact funding. So we'll start with Carol, and the easiest way to understand what their focus is and what they want to fund and invest in is actually examples. So Carol, can you give us an example or even examples of projects or organizations that Northeast has already invested or funded in Thailand?
Okay. I don't think I want to name names today.
Sure, you don't have to.
But I could give you sort of an idea of what stage or what type of organizations or projects we fund. So I think just to say, we do fund a lot in Thailand, or we want to fund more in Thailand. So just, everybody in the audience, please come to us. Please come to me after today. But just in general, I think for us, to answer your question, we always ask ourselves, what's the purpose of our funding? And I guess there's two things I want to just raise. One, the main thing of our capital is really for our families, is to build a better world for the next generations. So for the Pandora family members, they have children who are really very young today, and they really want to make sure that they leave the world a better place for their children and the next generations to come. So for that matter, a lot of the projects that we fund are in the environment space. Just because, as we all know, the environment is degrading faster than we expect. That's one. And two, education, because it's the only way for us to sort of groom the next generations. So I think these two thematic areas is something that we are very interested in Thailand especially. So I think that's one. I think secondly, the way we fund is really trying to meet a gap. And, we don't have endless kind of capital that we can just, throw out forever. So really see our capital as catalytic capital, in which, in our opinion, is to bridge existing financing gaps. So particularly, so what I mean is we look for early stage innovations who are really just testing out their concepts, but have high potential for impact. And these are people or founders or enterprises who have problems getting funding from other conventional or institutional investors because they are too early or too risky. So I think the purpose of our capital is becoming early. We want to use our capital to help them build a track record of impact, build more credibility, and so that they can go on then to raise a bigger funding from other people like Garden Impact or, Beneficial Returns. So I think Beneficial Returns is playing in the same field as us, but you know what I mean. So I think that's kind of like where we are in terms of where we move our money to. And then the last thing I wanted to point out is just we look for founders who are maybe less educated or less connected or less sort of exposed to the whole startup scenes. We're quite passionate in identifying them from these areas where they probably need a bit more help or just to handhold them through this journey of finding more funding from essentially the startup scene. So that's kind of like how we move our money to the type of projects that we support in Thailand, at least for a start.
Great, thank you. I am sure a lot of people are taking lots of notes and thinking, oh, I need to speak to Carol. So Carol, you are going to be a very popular person, I'm sure. But yeah, definitely, that's the whole point of the panel, is to bring awareness of what is available and build these connections. Alex, can you let us know some of the projects that Beneficial Returns has done in Thailand?
Sure. We only have one, unfortunately. I hope that will change soon. We fund an organic rice farming company in northern Thailand, so in the Chiang Rai area. There are actually 3 companies over there. We fund one of them. So they connect farmers, rice farmers, through organic ways of farming with the value chains. So it gets exported to markets like the US and all of that. And what we funded there was a line of machinery to turn rice into rice noodles. So something like 4 billion instant noodles meals are consumed every year. So, and out of that, a very tiny percentage is actually organic. So we help to fund one of the lines. They make pasta, they make instant noodles, and even the seasoning is organic. So we love that because we're really passionate about preserving and regenerating topsoil. And so I think there are many poor communities that are into farming. And I guess what we are hoping to fund is not just any farming, not chemical agriculture, not conventional farming, but enterprises that have an intent to move ever more towards organic regenerative kind of farming. So that's the one enterprise that we fund in Thailand.
Great, thank you. And I like that you're looking for more projects. So yet again, please get in touch with Alex if that is what you do. Interestingly, that company, so I grew up and I've lived in Australia for many, many years before moving to Singapore. And I used to eat that. So that product is actually found back in Australia in our supermarkets. So it's, I've tasted it and it's actually really good. So Yingluck, what kind of project, and I believe there's one that you also have out in Thailand. Can you share with us more about this?
All right. Right now I'm sharing my screen. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, thank you. Right. Earlier on, I just introduced myself. I introduced Garden Impact. So I'm just going to link Garden Impact with the type of investments we do. As you can see, I said that our focus is people, and so you can see that we are looking at helping the marginalized poor. We would like to find ways to empower them, and then provide them with opportunity and dignity. Now, this is a TBN seminar, and we work very closely with TBN, fighting poverty through enterprise in Southeast Asia. So in other words, we look for businesses that are entrepreneurial in nature and focuses on fighting poverty, alleviating poverty among the poor. And so in Thailand, the example in Thailand I can give is Kestrel Biosciences. Now, you may ask, what has people got to do with this? This is a bioscience company. Well, through biosciences, through medication, we would like to bring inexpensive health care to the poor people around the world. And through the help of affordable health care, we could help these people therefore become healthier, and then they can get on with a better life, and they can progress into being growing up healthily. So this is the example for Thailand. In Indonesia, we're going to education, helping directly people as well. But in Thailand, this is our investment, Kestrel Bioscience. Now, the stage of investment that Garden Impact does is to go into growth stage investments. When we started, we actually started with very early startups. And then we learned that it was very difficult to invest in startups because there were too many challenges. So over the early years, we've learned that we will get away from early stage investment to working with companies that already have proven the concept of the business and they're already generating revenues. And we found that this was easier because we were able to contribute more to the growth of such companies. So that would be the foundation of how we invest.
Thank you, Yingluck. So you can see from here that's a little bit of a kind of stage, right? So Carol's talking about funding really early stage. And then Yingluck at Garden Impact is coming when the revenue is onboarded, and then Alex will come in with capital for loans, actually for working capital and equipment. So it's actually quite a good. You can picture where these groups can come in at different stages. So maybe staying with Yingluck, what kind of financial instruments? So are we talking debt? Are we talking equity? Are we talking grants? Or I know that Carol has mentioned before that they do a lot of them. But for Garden Impact, what kind of instruments do you guys issue and work with?
Right. In the case of Garden Impact, we are a little bit cautious. So what we normally start is with a kind of a hybrid loan called convertible bonds. In other words, we lend the money, right, with the option that if it turns out to be positive and prospective, we have the chance or option to convert that loan into equity. So that's called a convertible bond. So we take the first step of the convertible bond, and on success, we make it into equity. And when the company gets bigger and needs more money, we will still continue with that approach. We say, okay, if you need temporary funds, we'll give another convertible bond that can be converted into equity again. So rounds of convertible bonds that become equity. That's the method that Agan Impact adopts. And one thing I will say is that we call our capital patient capital, because we have very low expectations of any dividends in the first couple of years, because we would rather help a social enterprise grow rather than try to get returns from them immediately.
Great, thank you, Yingluck. We'll go next to actually Alex, because I know Carol's going to cover all sorts, because they do all sorts. So maybe easier to go to Alex first. What kind of instruments do you guys issue?
Yeah, we are really easy and really vanilla. So our loans are generally amortizing over 3, 4, 5 years, and usually monthly repayment or quarterly repayment. For the fund that supports indigenous people, I think that we don't require collateral. For the other main fund, we usually require some kind of a collateral, because it's to fund machinery and equipment anyway, to scale or to save costs. So that's we're quite vanilla, and we don't take equity stake. I think we like the owners and to keep a lot of it, because I think our value added is really to get them to scale, help them to scale, and then we're happy to partner with them that way. And usually at the end of our loan, we would give an impact bonus based on a pre-agreed impact metric. So this could be an average payout to farmers. This could be a number of farmers that they work with. Usually it's something that's mutually agreed, and if they hit that milestone, and this is related to impact reporting as well, we will usually forgive the final payment, which will bring down the effective interest rate.
Great, thank you. And we will talk about impact measurement and reporting later on as well. So we'll come back to that. So Carol, maybe I should ask, what don't you do? But no, we will go. What kind of instruments, or how do you help these organizations?
Well, I mean, to be honest, even though I said we are flexible in giving anywhere across the spectrum, I'm quite embarrassed to admit that we often give out more grants than we should, even when the situation calls for other kind of debt structures or, and there's a few reasons for that. One, we are working with really early stage kind of enterprises where, to be honest, you don't really want to introduce a loan at that point of time, or sort of equity investment where it's too early. So grants are often, more often or so, it's the most useful kind of tool at that matter. It's R&D, test their concepts, it's really trying to help them find product market fit, that kind of thing. Two also is timeliness. I mean, when founders need finance, they really need it. They don't have the time to wait for you to sort of structure different kind of deals. I think we often find ourselves getting sort of lost in the whole 3 months, 6 months, time to just structure an equity deal, which oftentimes you miss the kind of opportunity for them to really test their concepts. So I think it's really because of the type of projects that we invest in. Therefore, we often give up more grants than we should, to be honest. But that said, in the last year, we started looking a lot more into other ways of blended finance structures that we're very, very interested in doing, but just haven't figured out how to do it quickly or quick enough to meet the need. So what I'm talking about is we started doing a lot of outcome-based financing, so kind of forgivable loans. So for instance, if I give you a loan and if you meet the impact outcomes that we decided early on, I'll forgive it as a grant. So this is something that we really find there's a huge potential for this type of structures, because particularly so for the kind of seed stage where they kind of got their MVP, but they really still need their first injection of first money to get things going, but not having the kind of loan loan burden. I think that's kind of one structure that we are increasingly looking into. Social impact bonds is something that we have also started structuring quite a bit around. So us being a guarantor where they get loan from other people, and then we just come in to guarantee the loan. And if they don't sort of meet certain requirements, we'll pay off the loan on their behalf. So these are kind of different structures that we are starting to look into more. But that said, this kind of structures takes a lot of time to structure, and it's something that we haven't figured out. Like for instance, beneficiary returns can do their debts quite quickly. I'm a fan of the Reciprocity Fund, but it's just as a family office, we don't have the capacity necessarily to do the due diligence and the kind of work that is required to structure this kind of deals. So I think we are looking to forge partnerships with people like beneficiary returns, this type of organizations where they can do the kind of due diligence and sort of help us put our capital in different areas to meet different needs of different types of founders, particularly so for those who are non-unicorns or for those business who will never get VC money. Where are they going to get their financing from? I think that's a huge gap that I think we see our capital being really useful for. But that said, we are really early on. I think we're still babies, and we would like to sort of like just reach out to whoever that can sort of help us on this journey to providing innovative capital for any founders out there.
Thank you. I have to say that it is very true that you look to collaborate, and that's how, you know, we actually started working together on that grant that was mentioned at the beginning with TBN and then Northeast giving a matching to really help social enterprises in Thailand really affected by the pandemic. So when, you know, sometimes I feel that when people say they want to collaborate, it's a statement, but I can tell you that it is really true, that we've had the joy and to work together actually between TBN and Northeast. So maybe staying on that topic of just due diligence, and I want to ask, what do you look for? I think you said, you know, the stages and all that, but I know that, you know, a lot of VCs and investors, they're like, oh, it's the people. How do you know, you know, that you want to invest in someone? So they have some kind of things that they look for. And then maybe also, you know, what kind of duration? So from the time, let's say, and you may not have the history because it's been very short, but how long does it take from the time that you talk to someone to the time that you can get them the funding? And then we'll go around the room to Alex and then to Yingluck on the same question.
Okay, I think for us, due diligence, the first thing that is really important to us is the why. Again, it's the purpose. So we always ask the founder, why do you start this enterprise, or why do you start this project? And if your answer is not impact first, we often would already walk away. I think we'll be very upfront and say that, you know, we are really looking for impact first kind of intentions. And I'm not saying that like you must only do impact. Of course, other things matter, but the why is really important to us. And also second thing is, how do we define impact? I mean, impact is just a word, right? I think the way we understand impact is really different. I think some people care about employment, some people care about education. I think for us, it's important to find founders where we have an aligned understanding of how we define impact together in this partnership. And if you cannot get the aligned understanding, we will walk away as well. And I guess the kind of other things that we really look for is whether your model, your business model is really tightly linked to your impact model. I mean, in the ideal scenario, your top line growth is basically correlated to your impact. So the better your business do, the more impact you create. But we all know that's kind of like an ideal kind of dream scenario. It doesn't happen all the time, but we're very much willing to work with you to fine tune your model to ensure that that's kind of correlated to some extent that it's reasonable. So I think that's the kind of due diligence we do, particularly at the first stage. Obviously, we do the other kind of commercial due diligence on your books and everything that's quite typical, but I think impact for us is always number one. And if we can't get past this stage, then we often don't continue on the conversation. And to be honest, in terms of time, it's anything between 1 month to like 6 months. I mean, we have had deals where we just cross 1 month and we're like, yeah, let's do this. And the money is out of our bank. But we have deals where it takes 6 months and we're still debating about what is impact, what do we really care about. And so it really depends on whether there's a match. It's a bit like dating. Do you get married in the first month or do you get married after 6 years, right? It's a bit of like dating. So I think just to end off, like we want to work with founders who want to work with us. They must like us as investors. And if you don't like us, then I don't see how this partnership will be able to materialize in the real terms. Because when the money comes in, that's when you start hating each other about your decision-making processes and everything. So I think we want to make sure that fundamentally speaking, there's a real match of interest and we really want to get married in this partnership. So I hope that makes sense.
No, that's fantastic. And I know that it's also something that Alex and Beneficial really look at as well. So Alex, do you mind just kind of saying, what do you guys look for in a project or a founder?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that honestly, I think one of the best perks for me personally working in this space is that I get to meet courageous, heroic entrepreneurs. And that often is very inspirational for me. You know, entrepreneurs that work because they're passionate and they're capable and they decide to devote themselves to this space. So I'll say that relationship is extremely mutually respecting. What we look for in founders, it's important that the enterprise is the one thing that they do. So if it is a side gig, if they've got a full-time job somewhere, and this is something that they want to do as a hobby, we generally do not work with such founders because this work is, to be honest, very hard, very worthwhile, but very hard. And we would love it for them to devote all their creative energies and all their time to doing it. I think like what Carol was saying and what Yingluck was saying earlier, our projects have to be reducing poverty. So there are many impact projects that are very cool and generally help people, but if they do not outrightly reduce poverty by connecting communities, producing communities to the market, then that generally doesn't work for us as well. I think one thing that we do quite, I'll say we do quite well in is we say yes or no very quickly. So for the Reciprocity Fund, for example, I mean, we can meet an enterprise and fund within the month. So we don't string you along, we don't drag you along. If there is a fit, we're just very quick, you know, and because it's debt as well, we can bypass the whole teething issue of valuation and all of that. There's no need. You know, we will ask for certain financials, we'll pour through them, and we'll either say yes or no very quickly. So even with beneficial returns, I mean, that is documented a bit more rigorously. We do involve law firms and all that, but even that, you know, within 2 and 3 months, you know, the money should be out of the door. So that's one thing that we really like to honor with entrepreneurs because we don't want to string you along. I think, I think that's it. I'll stop here.
Thanks, Alex. I remember talking to your colleague, so Ted, the founder of Beneficial Returns in the US. And back in the day where we could meet in person and travel, he said one of his tests to see whether he would invest into the founder is that if he was stuck in the airport because the flight was delayed with the founder, would he enjoy and look forward to spending that time together? Or would he dread and like think, oh, this is going to be a very long 10 hours? So it is very relational. And just what Carol said before, just about a relationship. I know it is harder these days with just being unable to visit on site and to really meet in person. But Alex, that really stuck with me when Ted said that.
I think he also meant somebody who would like to have a beer with.
Oh, a beer. Good. Well, thank you for that, Alex. And over to Yingluck. What does Garden Impact look for and the due diligence process?
Well, the two things that Carol and Alex have already mentioned, we re-endorse that. And the first one was Carol was saying why. Why do they want to do it? And then Alex says the person must be passionate about why he or she wants to do it. We subscribe to both of these as well. The reason, the driving force, and then the passion for wanting to do it. In addition to that, we also look for that honesty factor. And this honesty factor is something that you sometimes say is the sixth sense of the relationship thing. You can tell, you know, whether you can believe in this person's passion and reason, that honesty factor. And coming from venture capital background, we still like them to have skin in the game. In other words, we would like them to be putting in whatever they have as their worth, right, as part of their commitment. So it's really showing their commitment to their passion. We like that, and so those are the key things. right? That we look at the person. Then of course we have to look at the business itself that they're going into. Does it align with garden impact's focus? As I mentioned, garden impact looks at how we alleviate poverty. So we are very people focused. So if someone comes and say, oh, we were going to clean the environment with seaweed and blah, 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 we can see that as being good, but it does not directly align with our people focus. So we say, we'll give it a miss. Whereas like in Singapore, there's an entrepreneur who says that he wants to help ex-offenders, redeem ex-offenders, help them to reintegrate into society. We see that as a directly people related focus. In Indonesia, education is again people related because you're helping people to educate themselves. Microloans to graduates, that's people related. And there's one that is not directly people related, but we still believe that in the long run it has got people effect, and that is plastic substitutes, right? It looks environment, but it actually provides employment to poor farmers because it's from the tapioca from the poor farmers that they're able to make these plastic substitutes. So there is a people element there, right? So for garden impact, people is very important. So that's where the people element comes in our criteria. In terms of size so we're not actually sector driven. We let the people be the basis for our decision. And in terms of the size of investment, it ranges from $100,000 up to $1 million. And hearing what Carol and Alex have said, I would love to work with them because Carol can give them the money to kickstart their business. Alex can lend them the money and we will come in and grow the company with them. So the three of us can work together.
Yeah, that's why when I was working with Da from Social Enterprise Thailand on this, I was like, this is the perfect panel because I know actually the three organizations quite well, having spent time with all of you. And I was like, it just covers the spectrum. So hopefully the people who are listening in and joining us today, they're like, oh, this is where we are at and all that. And so hopefully you can connect with someone that is really at your point of need in terms of your organization. So I know we've talked a lot about impact. So then, okay, how do we measure it, and how do do you get them to report every quarter, every year on the impact metrics? We all know that measuring impact is also very difficult, and there are a lot of different frameworks and all that. So how do you navigate it and help actually even the founders measure impact, and then how do you keep them on track as well as their enterprise grows? So maybe I'll start with Carol. Carol has a lot of experience actually in the measurement of impact prior to joining Northeast. So I'm going to start with her because I know she probably has a lot to say in this area.
I will try not to say too much. So I guess for us, we want to maintain to a large degree some sort of flexibility. I think I always ask founders, tell me what you're measuring. Because to me, I feel that the deliberate choice of founders choosing what to measure and what not to measure tells me a story of what they choose to value. And I think in that process of asking them actually, what are you measuring, what are you not measuring, it tells me a lot about the why. It's also part of due diligence, like why and how you envision kind of your model to materialize in the real world. So that's kind of like my first starting point. Obviously, I ask them kind of what you're measuring. Second is, do you have an impact model, and how? Show me your impact model. So I think I've done a lot of theories of change in my career in the last kind of 12 years. So I do a lot of that training and I support a lot of enterprises to develop their own theories of change. We always use that as a starting point. And then from that theory of change, understanding what are the 3 to 5 indicators that are really meaningful to measure. So we don't ask you to measure 10, 20 indicators that is not meaningful. If it's 3, it's 3. If it's 5, it's 5. But let's just focus on the 3 to 5 and develop tools that are responsive to the communities you're working with so that it's appropriate, it's not too time consuming, it's not costly, because a lot of founders always say it's too expensive to collect data. When I collect data, I don't use it. Perfectly agree with everybody. If you don't use the data, then don't collect it. So we always work very closely with the founders to determine what kind of metrics to use, what kind of tools you use, and how do we optimize the process of data collection, and how do you analyze the data to inform your model. Because to us, collecting data is less about accounting to us as an investor. It's more about informing your own model to improve it over time so that your model actually meets greater impact in the long run. It's more for learning purposes as opposed to accountability. So I think because of that matter, we often invest a lot of resources in-house just to help different founders go through this process before they go and meet institutional investors where they don't even ask for theories of change, right? They just start asking me what's your top line kind of indicator, just show me your results, and that's end of story. So we want to help you get there basically to be able to show these results to your future investors. So I hope that makes sense. Yeah, I'll stop here.
Yes, no, that makes sense. And I really like that approach. From another group that I'm involved in, they always say that measurement is really to prove and improve. So it's to validate that what you're doing is actually having an impact. And then from there, it's actually to improve. So like you said, if you're not using that data to actually improve and actually using it for something that is worthless to measure and keep track of. Thank you for that. And so Alex, how do you guys go about this?
Yeah, good question. I think when we think about impact measurement, I'd really like to think of it as the quantitative and the qualitative, the head and the heart. And for quantitative data, usually it would be something that the social enterprise is already measuring. How much are they paying on average per farmer per year, for example? And this will require some discipline on their part to really keep tabs on how much they pay. And a lot of these businesses, because they are connecting communities with the market, their top line is very much related to, in fact, what their cost of goods sold usually is what they pay out to communities. So usually it's one metric or two metrics. And something that we've found very challenging through COVID is that we're not able to travel to these communities, because that's one thing we love to do. We love to take qualitative stories as well of the one family, of the two families in the community, and how their lives have changed. And right at the start of this, I said that one thing we love to do is to connect the rich and the poor. And I find that stories really speak, and they highlight certain intangibles that numbers, just miss. So when it comes to impact measurement, we really like to have the genius of the end, the numbers and the stories.
Right, thank you. And I like how simple it is in terms that you just said one or two metrics, and I've seen actually some of your reports as well. It's really fantastic, and the storytelling of just the change in community. You can really feel the impact of the investment. Yingluck, how does our garden impact go about this?
Well, like Alex, we look at the quantitative and the qualitative because that's important. It's easy to get the quantitative aspect because you just look at numbers. There's a qualitative aspect that has a little bit more value that you can't actually quantify. But underlying it all, I think I have to make a distinction between output and outcome. Initially, when we started, we tended to just look at the output. Like, for example, you say, oh, I've trained so many people, that's output. But so what? After they've been trained, if nothing happens with that training, then there is no outcome. So we have moved towards just looking at output to actually follow through to see what is the outcome of the output. So we are on the quantitative side, we're looking at quantitative and qualitative side, we're looking at the outcome. So for example, take again the example of helping ex-offenders in Singapore. Right, we now have a training program where we train them to upskill them. And so after the training program, that's the output. That's not good enough. We want to follow through by saying, can we get them a better job? And if they get a better job, that is the outcome, that they've got a better job. Can they stay in that job? How long can they stay in that job, right? So the outcome goes from the output to the outcome. And after that, we want to look at what are the qualitative aspects. How has this helped the relationship with their family members, the quality of the relationship at home? And that is the difficult bit. How do you measure that qualitative thing? Has the family benefited? Because, you know, the breadwinner has now dignity, he's got employment. So, you know, that's a spectrum that we are looking at. And we've actually called in professionals to help us measure this outcome. And one of the professionals actually is introduced by Wen herself from someone in a company in Australia. And so we're now putting the things in order. Imagine after 10 years of running your business, we are finally saying, okay, we're going to have proper matrix. And underlying it all, as Carol says, is a theory of change.
Yeah, thank you for that. It is definitely a work in progress. I think everyone is learning and getting better at this. And so I think it's not to feel guilty or, you know, like feeling so far behind, but we're all learning, and these forums are really great just to share your learnings and the different approaches. And why we're talking so much about impact measurement is because all these organizations and these funds are investing to get impact. So we really have to always go back to measurement and just understanding the impact, because otherwise, I mean, they wouldn't be investing, they wouldn't be looking for these projects to really benefit people's well-being and benefit communities. So I hope that has been helpful, and please send through any questions on this as well. We've got a couple of questions that's been sent through. We will definitely get there. Actually, we might start already on some of the questions. To Alex and Yingluck, how do you get individual investors to on board with you to invest in the fund? How do you grow people who are willing to give patient loan or invest in impact organizations? I think this is also a good question, because some of these social enterprises will also want to find their own investors, right? Not just from funds, but you both have experience in actually raising capital and getting people to invest. So how do you meet them, and how do you convince them to give to put in patient capital?
Shall I start?
Yeah, go ahead, Yingluck, and then we'll go to Alex.
Well, this is what we call fundraising, right? And I'll talk on behalf of Mason, because he was the one who started Garden Impact, and he's the one who started fundraising. And imagine you throw a pebble in the water, and then you get the ripple effect, right? It goes round and round and round. The first ripple effect will be the people around you. Who are the like-minded people in your circle of friends that you think would support and align with your thinking? That would be the first ripple effect. And Mason spent the first couple of years doing just that. Individual investor friends or people that he knew, and he felt that they had similar values. He approached them and told them what he was doing. And he says that I'm raising money for this, can I count on your support on this? So that was how he did. And then the second ripple effect will be, they will bring in the other friends, right? Or the other people who know them, who know them. And so the circle widens. And as it widens, then you get the reactive investors. People hear about it and they start inquiring, what is this Garden Impact all about? And that's where you get more institutional type investors. So we start with the personal investors, and then you grow wider with friends of friends, and then it gets wider and you get the attention of institutional investors. So that's the way Garden Impact has gone about getting the investors.
Right, thanks, Yingluck. Alex?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for the question. I think it's a great question. And to be honest, although we care deeply about the communities that our enterprises work in, I personally care a lot about the investors as well, because you can be poor and missing the mark, and you can absolutely be rich and missing the mark. You can be poor materially, or you can be poor in purpose, right? So what we try to do with investors is we invite them to come on board with us. Often how we do that is we sell them a part of our loan. So we will pay them a return of between 3.5% and 4.5%. And this is also an amortizing loan. So we repay them most of the time every quarter, principal and interest over the tenor of the loan. It could be 3, 4, 5 years. And so there's cash outlay right at the start when we make that loan. But the whole time you are getting repaid just as the enterprise repays us. And so you're exposed to the same risk that the company is exposed to. But we will always retain a minimum of 20% in the loans that we make. Earlier, Yingok mentioned skin in the game. I think entrepreneurs need to have skin in the game, and investors like ourselves absolutely need to have skin in the game. So we will always retain a portion of it, and that's almost our stamp of approval, right? That this is a credit we feel comfortable with, and this is a company that we believe are realizing impact. So that's how we invite investors on board. Usually we require a minimum of $25,000 US. Usually that's our minimum, but we have reduced that minimum before. And I think this is quite attractive for especially people who have capital to invest, because the cash flows are very predictable, right? In fact, at the point of investment, we'll give you a schedule. This is what you should expect to get over the life of investment. And what I love about inviting people to come on and be investors is that these conversations then make it into their homes, make it into husband and wife conversations, make it into parent-child conversations, make it into extended family conversations, and they become proud of what they invest in. And I love that. I'll stop here.
Great, thanks, Alex. I think I would love to share two things. So from what I'm kind of hearing from Alex and Yingluck as well, I think even having a track record where, like they've had a good experience and it's worked, then I think that builds the confidence for people to then put in more or to put in again in terms of investing. The second one actually, and this is what I've learned working in this area in the last 2 years, is that if someone was going to give a donation anyway, if someone was going to give a grant, they will never get that money back. Basically, let's say I wanted to give $10,000 away. I give it to an organization, I'll never get it back. But actually, if I were to loan it or invest it as an impact investment, there is a chance I might get some of it back. And a chance of getting that back, and even if it's a lower return, is still better than a full donation. So I think that's one of the strategies in terms of if you are targeting people who are already philanthropists, already giving money away, and to get them to experience impact investing, that's a very logical and easy way. And they're like, oh, so when the money comes back, I can then put it out again. And so that money keeps being recycled in impact investing. And that is, a safe step because they were going to give that money away anyway. So I thought that was a very good conversation of how to convince or start that conversation with people who are interested in impact investing. So now to the next question, and thank you to the person who asked that one. For all three panelists, what do you think are the strengths and weaknesses of Thai social enterprises that you have funded compared to others in the Southeast Asian region? So any one of the three, please speak up if you have anything to share.
I can go first. Well, I mean, strength, I would say this is quite unique to the Thai enterprises that we've been supporting or we have met, I think just in general. Resilience. I think COVID has been a very difficult time for a lot of enterprises like in the region. But I think the Thai enterprises that I've met, particularly so in this recent grant that we're working with TBN Asia on, they're really resilient. Like they don't say, I'm going to give up because it's COVID, I'm just going to close shop and go do something else. I mean, they always find ways to sort of come back from the crisis, and they will adapt their model. They'll find ways to figure out how do we survive. They put in more money of their own. You said skin in the game, Yingluck, they totally put their entire body into the game. They pump more money and they just try to survive this kind of COVID period to get to the point where they say, okay, now I can just fly again. So I think that's kind of the first the main key strength. I think that was slightly different from the other enterprises that we've been working with in the other region. In terms of weakness, I can't say this is particularly unique to Thailand. I would say this is a common weakness across all the enterprises that we work with is impact measurement. I think it's quite nascent. Most enterprises, they're still figuring out, like Yingluck, you said, outputs, outcomes. Like they just measure things like number of jobs I've created, number of people that I reached, number of packets that I've sold. And, I think that's something that we see a lot. And they haven't really gotten an understanding of how do you go past the outputs and really measure the outcomes or the change that people is experiencing because of your enterprise. That's something that is quite lacking, not just in Thailand, I would say in the region. Most enterprises that I meet don't even have the basic understanding of an impact model or how do you even do that, which is why we invest a lot of ecosystem builders to do this kind of training for enterprises. And I think the last thing I would say, it's also a weakness across all enterprises is the understanding they don't really measure unintended negative impact. So we always say impact, assuming that it's always positive, but we all know that any kind of actions bring across both positive and negative impact. I think certain kind of businesses do actually result in some negative consequences in the supply chain, for instance. And I think as a founder, it's important for you to understand not just what change positively are you creating, but also what negative impact your business is bringing to that whole ecosystem. Why is that important? Because you can't just bring your business across the line, ignoring the middleman in the in the supply chain or the kind of men that you don't invest in. I think there are negative consequences that we can actually try to reduce in the midst of increasing our positive impact. I think that's something that is very important to us, and we don't really see that often, not just in the enterprise sector, but also in the non-profit sector, that people often forget that to measure negative impact and understand how they can reduce that in the process. So yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Yes, no, that's very clear. And actually, I'm going to give advertise TBN. We are actually running a course. And so for anyone who wants to get help in basically, growing their enterprise, but also we do focus on theory of change. We do focus on impact measurement, and that's where the help we can give as well as part of Transformational Business Network. So please get in touch if you want to apply. We do have a program for very, very early stage, but we also have one program that is for, there's a revenue model already, and it's a later stage. So please seek out the help if you actually need that help. And actually, Carol is our trainer on it. So she's fantastic, and she explains it in a very simple way. So it's not to feel intimidated or daunted by doing this. It's actually very helpful, and you can do it step by step as well. So to Yingluck or Alex, any differences that you've seen in terms of the Thai social entrepreneurs or enterprises compared to regionally?
Right. As Carol mentioned, actually, strengths and weaknesses of all the social and entrepreneurs in the region, they're all very similar. They've got the challenges, right? They've got all they're passionate about what they do. So I don't actually see much difference, to be honest, between the strengths and weaknesses of the various enterprises in the various countries in ASEAN or in Southeast Asia. The only thing I would say, which has nothing to do with strengths and weaknesses, is that it's a joy going to Thailand to do it because the food is good, and then and the Thais have got this this very how shall I put it, this joie de la vie, the sabai and sanok culture about it that makes it very fun to be in Thailand.
Okay, so basically, Yingluck is inviting anyone to apply because he wants to come out as soon as he can to eat and to be with the Thai community, which is true. I do love going there. I think we're all hanging out to be able to travel again and to go visit Thailand as well. Alex, anything you'd like to add?
Not really. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely just resonate with Yingluck, the papaya salad and a mango salad. Um, Thais is so warm, and yeah, it's a real joy to work with them. I guess in terms of weaknesses, just the ideas that these generally apply to social enterprises all over, and this is something that I'm very aware of in my own life. That we do not rise to the level of our goals. We do not necessarily, we won't rise to the level of our goals. Instead, we will fall to the level of our systems. So we will fall to the level of our discipline. And whatever we really want to accomplish, we should try to systematize it, right? We should try to bake it into habits. We should try to bake it into internal systems in order to try and achieve these goals. And an example is, for example, financial record keeping. We find that sometimes enterprises are, because it's expensive as well, so record keeping sometimes is what gets sacrificed. And I think that discipline, if we're able to form it very early on, really goes a long way to help us, to serve us.
Oh, thank you. That's very, very practical. And I think that would be really helpful as well. I was laughing before just on all the food talk, because I think it's coming to dinner time. So everyone's thinking about food. But it is true. Thai food is fantastic. And I really can't wait to travel to eat again. And I think we have one last question, which is perfect timing. And this is for Carol. So Carol, as you said, most of your funding is in the form of grants. For the ones that are more investment based, what is the proportion of scoring in terms for the financial return versus comparing to the impact returns?
To be honest, we don't adopt a scoring system when we assess. We don't assess impact investments the same way we assess equity, traditional equity or venture investments. That's a total different department altogether. So I would say from my department, we only care about impact. And I think like what Wen say, we predominantly work with grants. So we were really to just make 100% losses anyway. We were signing off grants every year as if it was going to be 100% losses. So I don't think financial return has been integral to us making any decisions at any point in time. I think if you can get 50%, we'll be happy. If you get back 80%, we'll be like, oh, great. If you get back 100%, fantastic. If you make a return, oh, great. But it's never, I would say it's never in our decision-making tree or matrix at all. If the impact is aligned with our intention, if we believe in your cause, we'll get back behind you, whether is it a grant, whether is it a debt, whether is it an equity investment. To be honest, I don't think I have a straight answer to telling you the scoring because we don't use that system at all. So I hope that makes sense because it's not really an answer, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's just great to know how Northeast operates. And so I'm going to end the session with just one question and for all three panelists. So then my question is, what are your hopes for impact investing for Thailand? For the organizations that you're working in, what kind of changes or hopes you have? So I know this is a deep question maybe, or maybe you haven't thought about it, but when you're ready, please go ahead.
I would like to see more Thai investors co-investing with us, because I think it'll give us more insight into how we could cooperate together as investors in Thailand, that is.
Great, thank you. So if anyone's listening who sits in that category, please get in touch with Yingluck. Carol and Alex.
Yeah,
Alex,
I want to dovetail. Oh, Carol, go first.
No, you go first.
Yeah, I want to dovetail a little bit about what Carol was saying earlier about the unintended negative consequences of some of our activities, as social enterprises. And because I'm a bit of a soil geek, and I love rich soil, I love the biology and soil, and sometimes because they are microscopic and because they cannot be seen, we often forget about them. But I think in trying to, I'll just start with a question. For example, we recognize good soil as dark and loose, right? But what gives it that dark color? what makes good soil dark, right? It's really the carbon. It's really the carbon. So I think we're playing defense often against climate change, but agriculture, which Thailand does a lot of, is able to not just play defense, but go on the offense, right? They are able to, through plants, pull the carbon from the atmosphere and put it in its proper place in the soil, in the ground. So I would love to fund more enterprises in Thailand that try to stay off the sites, the pesticides, the fungicides, the herbicides, and even chemical fertilizers, and try to work with biology, try to work with nature to produce abundant, nutrient-rich crop.
Great, thank you. And Carol?
Well, I would like to see more Thai enterprises reaching out to me. Just kidding. But I think just in general, in terms of impact investing as an ecosystem, what I really like to see, it's really this shift in mindset about asking what can you give to the world as opposed to what do I need from this investment. And I'm speaking both from the investor lens, but also from the founder's lens. I think oftentimes when we go into investment and discussing deals, we often just keep thinking, what can I get out of this investment? Can I grow my business? Can I give them this? But I think impact has always taken a back seat. It's always not at the forefront of decision making. I think the shift in understanding, kind of like asking ourselves constantly, what can my investment do to the world? Rather than what can I get out of this investment is quite critical to me. It sounds very simple, but I think the moment we get this shift, then we will start to prioritize impact in everything we do. And then that to me, it should be the essence of impact investing, because at the end of the day, you want the world to become a better place. That's, I don't know, I hope that kind of summarized kind of what I feel.
Very beautifully said, Carol. Thank you. We actually just have one very quick question that snuck in. Do any of your organizations fund projects or organizations that help people with special needs? I would say potentially yes for Garden Impact and for Carol, right? In Northeast? Yep. Okay. And Alex, you wouldn't look at that, would you? Not
specifically, no.
Yeah. No problems. Okay, so we're two in the room. So please, whoever wrote that question, please reach out to them. So we're 4 minutes out, and I think I'll close now. I just want to say thank you so much, firstly, to the speakers, to Carol, Yingluck, and Alex. These are people I count as friends, and it's just such a joy to get to hang out with them in a panel and keep discussing things that are very close to all our hearts. We are very passionate about this, so it's amazing just to build relationship even out here in Singapore, and if we can extend that to more people who care about this, it's a privilege for all of us to have participated in this, so thank you for your time. And to SE Thailand, thank you for putting this on and giving us the privilege of sharing this. And we are all looking forward towards being able to travel and to meet people in person and to have a meal together. We really, really can't wait. So just thank you, and please stay safe and hope to stay in touch. I'll hand it back over to SE Thailand.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is such an invaluable session, and I think all the attendees are very lucky to have this opportunity listening you all. Knowing who they should walk to is not only the goal here, but also knowing the point of view from the investor side as well. Our highest appreciation goes to you all, and hope we could meet in person in another session. Maybe dinner talk. We can have like a moment, fun, อร่อย delicious สนุกสบาย together, so we can teach the lesson or tell something useful for SE in Thailand to learn from you all. Again, thank you very much, and wish you all a great evening ahead. Bye bye for now. Take care.
Bye bye. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you very much.